The next item up is the countywide millage ordinance. This is going to involve a revised schedule for payments that's been sent around the table. The taxpayers will have the benefit of more time in this particular calendar year, all the way to December 1, before property tax payments are made. One time only, not 2 installments this year. And that's been passed around. We're going to let the tax assessors come up, Ms. Middleton, and let's see, where's John? They're here. If they come up, please give them your name and address for the record. Talk about the revaluation that's been going on, reassessments for the last couple of years, and getting that entered into the system.
My name is John Williams. I'm at 8225 Chapel Lake Drive in Midland. I'm the Deputy Chief Appraiser. Ms. Middleton is the Chief Appraiser. I brought with me today Mary Griffin, who is the Project Manager for the software conversion for Tyler Technologies. We just have a short presentation on the original project agenda and the agenda that we're under now today. Of course, ask any questions you have of me or Ms. Mary. She's probably the best qualified individual to answer questions regarding the conversion itself and the project where it stands to date. But I'll just go ahead and go through this. Some of this you saw over a year ago. Let me draw your attention to one thing at the top of this title, Oasis System Upgrade. That's the actual software conversion. When I talk about a software conversion, it's from the old Oasis to the new IAS World software. The other aspect of this was the real property reassessment project. So we actually had 2 projects going, coinciding with one another throughout this last 2 years. The IAS World software upgrade was a web-based software upgrade for the Board of Tax Assessors Property Assessment and the Tax Commissioner's Office. It included a public access website module as well. The reassessment services for taxable real property included street-level imagery, data verification, valuation, and then culminating with support of those values. The original project timeline, as you see, December Tax Commissioner go live. May of this year, our Board of Tax Assessors go live. And when you see go live, that means the switch is turned on and we're operating with that software. So for my office, the Board of Tax Assessors, we went live May 1. The public access website went live as well on June 1, with the intent of running that coinciding with a month of QPublic. That is a software, it's more of a portal with QPublic. They're a third-party vendor. We now own and operate our own website that the public has access to, not only all of our information, tax assessment records, property records, zoning, etc., but the tax commissioner's records as well, at least the records that she would want to make public. So that's all on that public access website, and it's live today. We schedule for the annual assessment notices to go out in June. The property tax bills would be mailed August 1, and our first installment due date at that time in the original agenda was to be October 1. I'll advance now to the proposed project timeline. This came out from a meeting yesterday between the city manager, the city attorney, Ms. Hodge, the city finance director. Angelica was there as well. Ms. Lula Huff and one of her assistants was there. Ms. Betty and I were also at the meeting. So this timeline stems from that. If you go back to the previous slide, the annual assessment notices were to be put out in June. The new agenda is still in June, but it's June 30. That's our proposed no later than time for our assessments to be mailed. There's a mandated, state-mandated 45-day appeal period that starts from the day those notices are mailed. So 45 days from June 30 is August 14th. Once that 45-day appeal period has transpired, one thing that we're in tune with this year that's different from other years, because of the county-wide revaluation that we're doing, We must remain within 8% of those parcels. We can't have more than 8% of our total taxable parcels appeal. That number is about 5,900, roughly. As a matter of fact, another slide has 5,662 appeals. If we go over 8% appeals, what that means is we have to start working those appeals and get below that 8% limit before the tax commissioner can take the digest to Atlanta. So that 8% is a little different on a reassessment year. Just for reference, our highest appeal to record, I say to record after conferring with Ms. Betty, the highest number of appeals that she recalls in her 52 years of service, 53, I'm sorry, is about 2,000. The next highest level of appeal number is about 1,200. So that gives you some perspective of where that 5,600 number would fall into. That would be almost 3 times our normal appeal. We do anticipate a higher number of appeals because of the revaluation, but we all believe that we will fall below that 8%. August 31st, the Board of Tax Assessors delivers the digest to the tax commissioner. The following portion of the agenda really falls into Ms. Huff's purview. September 1, the tax commissioner receives that digest from us. She will need to file a request for an extension with Atlanta. That digest is due September 1. So she's going to automatically file for an extension with the state. She will review the digest, submit the digest to the state for approval, and prepare the tax bills. She is giving herself 30 days to do those 4 steps. So October 1, the tax commissioner mails the tax bills, and that will be the postmark date that they will work from there. If you notice, the first bullet under December 1 taxpayer taxes are due. The state law provides the taxpayer 60 days to pay once tax bills have been mailed based on the postmark date. So that prior postmark date of October 1, 60 days from that date is December 1. The first installment payment due date for 2017 is eliminated due to the project's impact on the billing schedule. Tax bills can be paid early and partial payments will be accepted, but the full balance is due December 1. December 2, taxpayers' taxes are delinquent. Interest shall begin to accrue on that date. December 20, the penalties accrue. That concludes the brief the brief presentation on where we were on our agenda and where we are today. Let me just go back to here. I will take any of your questions.
Are there any questions? Councilor Thomas?
What kind of activity have you decided to do in order to make sure that these new dates are out there and known by not only the taxpayers, but, my taxes are paid by escrow? You know, how are we making sure that the banks and everybody knows that these dates have been tweaked somewhat?
The tax commissioner communicates that. It'll be on the bill that goes out, and they'll also, I'm going to use the word tape, a digital file that goes out to the lenders from the tax commissioner. And again, I'm speaking for the tax commissioner's office, but the little bit I understand about how they work, they will be the ones communicating those new dates to all the parties that are concerned.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, we normally have 2 pay dates. The public is allowed to have 2 different dates to pay their property taxes.
Yes.
We're not doing that this year. We're only going to have 1 date, and that'll be December.
Yes.
Okay? They'll be notified October, and it'll be due no later than December 1st.
That's correct.
Okay? Is there any way that you can go back and communicate that differently to the public so that they understand what's going on?
I'm not so sure what you mean by communicate differently. We will communicate with the tax commissioner. It'll be on the bill that they get. Now that will be later than the normal bill that would go out for the October 1 payment.
Okay.
Will we communicate with the?
Okay, John Doe, Columbus,
sir.
Georgia, is going to receive their tax bill.
Yes,
And they're going to assume, they'll probably not read it very carefully. They will assume that they pay one part of it at some point and another part later. They're not understanding that there's a different system this time. So how are you going to account for that?
Again, my only thought would be that the tax commissioner would make the appropriate announcements, notices. We can put that on the public access website that I talked about earlier. We can put notices on that, put it on the CCG website. I hate to speak for the tax commissioner, but she will be the one to notify taxpayers on that bill. And as you said, they're not always read completely. The upside, if you will, they can make a payment in October if they choose to. If they just didn't read it and went ahead with their normal payment methodology, that would work fine. They're going to accept those early payments. They're just not due till
It
December.
seems as though we would need you to work with the commissioner, maybe to put a different insert on the
Council
cover.
Allen, city manager has a response for you.
Well, I'd like to finish my question, if,
Yes, sir.
is that possible?
Yes, sir. We can work directly with the tax commissioner and do whatever's needed, as according to her, what she decides. We'll work with her.
Okay, I yield, Mayor Pro Tem.
And
Okay.
thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As John indicated, we met with all parties yesterday to make sure that we would bring this to you and the public today to start the conversation. What I'd like to do is convene another meeting with the tax commissioner, tax assessor, and all the parties, and maybe outline a strategy for communication. And then we do have a council meeting next week, and let me bring that back to you as an update on my agenda, what that strategy will be.
Okay, I would like to hear some clarification on why it was delayed from June 1st to June 30th, the notices.
Sure.
Sure. The first part that began this delay, and it goes back to May 1st was always our target date to get all the values approved by the Board of Assessors. And just a brief summary, not to try to educate you on how we work. We, with Tyler Technology, created or basically came up with these values. They were shown to our staff, residential, commercial staff, and then they were taken to the Board of Assessors for approval. So our target date was always May 1 to have all the county's properties approved by the Board of Assessors. About 2 weeks prior to that date, I was made aware that there was some difficulty in developing the residential models that are necessary to calculate those values. And it can get real technical here, but just in summary, in the mass appraisal technique or concept that we use, tables are designed that give values that each property can pull from. If this, value per square foot, values of garages, values of different components of the houses. And when the system assesses a property, it pulls from those tables for those values. So there were some difficulties in trying to establish the more complex aspects of the city. And in case you don't know it, we have a wide variety of property types, property values. It goes from both ends of the spectrum. We are completely unique, in my opinion, in that manner. But the complexities began with the land values for residential properties. And we broke the city up into 9 different neighborhoods, but really 4 quadrants, and tackled each quadrant at one time. And the first quadrant that came up, those complexities or difficulties in those accurate cost tables were found. And so all hands were on deck. Tyler Technologies had their best and brightest on the case, so to speak, and literally worked 7 days a week for weeks trying to debunk the model and make it work for all the properties in that first quadrant that we were analyzing. So instead of taking all the properties on May 1, we took the first quadrant to the board on May 1. And worked through a very long meeting, working through all those values for all the neighborhoods within that quadrant, that quarter of the city. Once we work through that, okay, so now it's sound. The tables that are used to give the values of the separate components were established and approved. So then we went forward with the next quadrant, which included residential properties, commercial, and residential condominiums. That was May 8th. The first quadrant was that first residential quadrant and all commercial properties. So we took care of about half of it by May 8th. We took care of the remainder of the residential property. When I say take care, presented the values to the board on May 15th. And the last two remaining parcels found to be the most complex, and you could probably guess one of them, if not both of them. The Green Island community was extremely complex, and I can get into that if you want me to. And then the new development that is Old Town. And the values within that development were also very complex, difficult for a model to say, here it is, this is exactly what it looks like, this is exactly what the values are in that area. Now model, go ahead and query the tables and apply the values. You just take Green Island, for example, and the various impacts on value to a property. Water view, what kind of water view? How much water frontage? Topography. A golf course view, what golf course view? So there, all these different pieces and parts had to be taken into account and applied to every parcel. It's not just an acre's worth this in Green Island, therefore 1.5 acres is worth 150% of that. There are situations where 1.5 acres is not worth what a half acre is in Green Island. So a lot of complexities that kind of break a model, if you will. And so that was the last group that was presented. That was the 22nd of May. So instead of 1 May, all properties are approved by the board. We're at 22 May, all properties approved by the board. At that time, it gets even more complex, if you will. We had 3 versions of a database running at the same time. We had the revaluation database, which is where Steve Wise worked, the manager of the revaluation project. We had the development database where Mary and her team was actually taking what we converted and dropping it in not only to the reval database, but the development database. Then we had the production database, which is what we operate with now. At the end of May 22, when all those values were approved, Mary's team had to take what was the reval database and drop it into production database. It sounds simple enough. But as soon as you do that with 70,000 parcels involved and the complexities that exist, there were outliers generated. And for the last 3 weeks, we've been working through the outliers, the multiple lists of hundreds of properties per tab, per spreadsheet, going through and working out the discrepancies. What we had is not showing up in what is. Why is that? Let's find the problem. Let's fix it. So Mary and Tyler Technologies anticipated about 3 weeks to go through that period of making sure every aspect of the conversion is correct. And again, this is all so we don't send out a faulty notice. That's the last thing we want to do. That's the reason why we didn't just get everything approved on May 1, and it took 3 weeks to May 22 to get everything approved by the board. That's the reason why after May 22, we didn't just drop it in production and print notices and send them, because there's a lot that could go wrong. And as I talked to you over a year ago, one of my main goals is accuracy. We don't want to send inaccurate notices out. Talk about hundreds and thousands of appeals. It would be very detrimental to our system and what we do to send out faulty notices. So all this has been an attempt to make it completely accurate. And Mary's here. I brought her on board in case you had questions about the conversion itself. But from May 22 to now, it's about 3 weeks. When we got pushed from May 1 to May 22, that pushed the project about 3 weeks. So that's where we are. That delay is what you see in the proposed timeline. It's caused by what I just described.
If I could, follow-up question.
Yes.
I guess, what I heard you talk about the property valuation changes.
Yes.
So there's a new formula for evaluating properties in this system than was in the old system?
It's not necessarily a new formula, it's mass appraisal
New
techniques.
criteria,
New software.
new criteria for a simple-minded person that doesn't understand technical
Yes, sir.
stuff.
And I get where you're coming from, and I'm
Okay.
trying to make sure I answer your question correctly. It's a new way of doing things.
So it's different than the way we used to do it.
Just because of the software and the capability of the software and everything that's built into it, yes. Criteria, I guess loosely you could say there's a new criteria for how we value the aspects of the components of the house or the commercial property, but it's still mass appraising.
Well, one thing that kind of piqued my interest was when you said waterfront view.
Yes.
I have a waterfront view in the winter. But so it just depends on what how you look at it. So the other thing that concerns me is the confidence you have in the program going forward,
I am completely
the
confident.
valuations of
Yes,
the
sir.
property.
That's why we've taken the time we've
'Cause
taken.
the other thing that concerns me is where we used to receive a certain portion of our tax revenue in October, we probably won't receive that, and we won't receive it until December, which gives us a great time span on revenue. And it could put the city in a tough situation, in the ability to pay our bills. And I'm concerned that the vendor, and I don't mean to be critical, but we are where we are. The vendor should have worked 24 hours a day with their best team to get this done so we could be sending things out by June 1. That's just my opinion, one counselor. I'd like to hear why we didn't do that.
I do know that they had their best people, almost 24 hours a day. They did sleep each day, but they were 7 days a week for, I know, 3 weeks from the time we identified the initial problem with the first quadrant, cost tables, land allocation that I described earlier. And they worked through that, from my perspective, very diligently and lots of hours to get it completed by the 22nd. From the 22nd to June 1st, 1 week, roughly, that was not enough time for them to take the revaluation database and put it into production and then work out all those kinks. We anticipated 3 weeks to do that. We're right at 3 weeks now. And my assumption is we'll be complete this week with that. So her 3-week anticipation, if you will, 3 to 4 weeks is what it's appearing like it'll be. But again, that initial delay started in May and pushed us back to where we are. I'm with you. I'm not trying to disparage or attack anyone. I do believe they did the best work that they could do under the situation that was at hand.
I'm assuming there was overtime involved in that process?
As far as how it impacts the cost of the project, no, sir, not to my knowledge.
So the city's not going to be sent a
No,
bill
sir.
for that?
Not to my knowledge.
That's good. Mr. City Manager, I would like for council to be briefed on the new system as we heard today. There are different criteria so we can better communicate to the public what criteria they're looking at so we can answer questions that may come. I hope we don't get to the past 8% appeals, but
If we do, we do. We'll probably know that before the 45th day. Typically, most people go ahead and file those appeals early, the exception being the commercial representatives. They tend to wait till the last hour for some reason. And so it takes about a week after that 45-day period for us to process all those last day applications that always come. But we'll know well before the 45th day if we see us bumping that 5,600 mark. That will be very obvious, I hope, early on.
Thank you, Mayor.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, Council Allen, when this was brought to my attention yesterday, one of the first concerns was cash flow for city, and so you're right on point. And with that, I asked them to work. We met about, I got to call it lunchtime yesterday to bring this to my attention, and I called an immediate meeting, and we met at 2:30 yesterday with all parties, and I see the tax commissioner here, and hopefully she will have some comments. And so I had them to put together at least this timeline to present to you today, but also I asked our finance director to be prepared to share with you the unintended consequence of this that will impact cash flow and how we operate between October, when we normally would expect to get the first payment from citizens, and citizens can still pay, of course, but if they don't pay by October 1st, there is no penalty, but it poses a situation for us that we're going to share with you when they're done.
Let me ask one more question. It puts all of us in an awkward situation. I mean, all of us and the tax commissioner as well. I mean, we have to respond when questions come up. But to Councilor Thomas's question, the escrow situation, the banks could pay, as they normally do, a payment in October and a payment. They could still do that.
Yes, sir. That was my question to someone in the tax commissioner's office. From my observation as a homeowner, they do that automatically, and they're very keen to alert me on the dollar or two that's under or over the allotted balance. But that seems to be an automatic process.
Okay.
And he told me that they communicate with the lenders, the banks, and give them that information electronically. They said tape, but electronically. So they will have that notification at the same time they would normally have that bill to pay by October 1. So my anticipation is that they'll communicate that. The tax commissioner's office will communicate with the lenders, as I told Ms. Thomas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
We can hit Tax Commissioner Howe.
Good morning.
and if I may, before she says anything, I'd like to say that we had a good meeting yesterday with the tax commissioner, and this was not caused by the tax commissioner. It's not driven by the tax commissioner. She's just trying to help us fix it. And of course, you know, we have the tax assessor and the tax assessor board, and that's where all of the control is. It's not controlled by me, it's not controlled by the mayor, it's not controlled by the tax commissioner. And so she's here to help. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, we're all one team. So what questions can I try to answer for you?
I guess the biggest question, Council Allen, you want to ask your question about what are we going to do about notifying the public?
I'm
Yes, ma'am.
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I was trying to, my concern was when the notices go out in October, John Doe, Columbusite receives their bill, and they'll probably do like I do normally, is tack it on the refrigerator and put a reminder up there. They won't understand that there's no longer two dates that you pay, 60/40 kind of thing. So could we put a notice in there to kind of educate them on that type?
I think if I understand you correctly, what means of communications are we going to use to communicate to our customers, our taxpayers, as to the change for 2017? We've been brainstorming on that, and one of the things that we are going to use is that we will be using a bright-colored insert to do an explanation of what's occurring at this point in time for each tax bill that goes out. That's one means we're going to use. We are going to inundate them with the CCG TV station running announcements concerning what's happening. We're going to do an interview with them. We're going to appeal to the news media, all forms of news media, to get the information out there that there is a change and try to explain that to them. We're also going to turn to various organizations out there that might be listening in right now, that if they would like for us to come to their organization and give them some background information on what has occurred here, we will be willing to do that. And we're open to utilize any other form of communication out there that you might think of that would help us get that message out. I know for sure we're going to have some busy phones. If you think that we only have one operator to answer the phones, okay, it's going to be rough for us. But we're going to use the website for the tax assessors, for us, for CCG's website, everything possible that we feel we can do. And we'll be working with the city manager's office, anything. So any citizens within the hearing of my voice, I'm pleading to you, hey, we've got a situation that we would like your help with in trying to get the message out that the deadline for 2017, if this is passed, for paying your taxes will be December 1. However, we will accept payment prior to that time. So as soon as you get your bill, which will be by October 1, you can make payment at that time. You can pay 40% at that time, or you can pay 60% at that time, you can pay 50% at that time, or you can pay 100% at that time. And we will be able, thanks to Tyler again, to be able to take those partial payments as we will consider them. And no one will be penalized for paying it prior to that time, thinking that you've got to have it in by October 1. As far as the mortgage companies are concerned that you were referring to, we will send them letters explaining what's occurring. We have about 5 or 6 major mortgage companies that we communicate to. We do send them their bills by tape. We do have about 3 of those, though, that wait to the last minute to pay, okay? So whether or not they will pay early or not, which would really help you out cash flow-wise, I don't know. But we will draft a letter to each one of them and make sure that they get letters. Okay, so that's how we will notify them.
I know you have a shortage in your office already of staffing, and you're doing everything you can to keep everything up to date. Is there any way, see, I think one of the concerns is if they don't find out until October 1st that they have to December 1st to pay. We normally get our tax notices when?
You would get them about August 1, August 2nd.
Is there any way, and it may cost us some money, is there any way we could send out a notice, some kind of notice to the taxpayer telling them that their official tax notice will not be received until October? If we could send that out in August, but if they want to pay some, they can.
Let me ask something of the tax assessors. Could we not do an insert on your 45-day notice? Would the state allow us to do that, to put an insert in there stating that the tax bills will be forthcoming October 1 rather than August 1? Do you think they would allow us to do that? That's a possibility. We could do that. That would get it to them about, all right, what happens with the OTNs, the official tax notice that they were referring to earlier, the tax assessors that has to be sent out, and that's a 45-day wait time on it. Right now, you're shooting for June 30th, is that correct? On June 30th, that notice would go out. The taxpayers will receive, stating that you have 45 days to appeal the assessment that's listed on your tax notice, right? What we could do is put a color-coded insert in there with that tax notice that says for 2017, there will only be one installment at December 1. We can word it and insert it at that time, make it nice and large, and that's their first notification. We could do that.
That's a good idea.
I think that is a wonderful solution.
And again, Mayor Pro Tem, and Commissioner, I don't know if you were here when I said it, but I do intend to convene the same group we had yesterday and outline the strategy for communicating this information to the public, and then we'll update council on exactly what we're going to be doing at next week's council meeting.
Sounds great.
I wanted to help relieve the possible call volume to the commissioner's office. Could we somehow link in 311 so that when she gets to a point where there's an overflow, that those calls will be forwarded over to maybe 311, and then those operators will be ready to respond to the
Well, and what I'd like to do is
easy questions maybe, and then kick it
talk to
back.
her about how we can help.
That's
So I will have that conversation with her.
We'll work it out.
Whether it be 311 or some other form of help,
whatever.
we'll work it out.
Councilor Woodson?
Ms. Hoff, thank you very much, and Ms. Betty for that teamwork. I really appreciate it because I'm kind of worried myself. But I have a question out of curiosity. Like myself, my taxes are paid by my mortgage to financial individuals. I don't pay the taxes. It's done in my payment. Do those companies also get notified? How do they know?
Right. When I mentioned earlier that the mortgage companies will be notified, that is your mortgage company that I'm referring to, okay? Those mortgage companies today, their bill is in the form of a tape. It's electronic, okay? We send them a tape of everyone who has their payments, like yourself. Your name is listed on there with the partial number, okay? And then they run it against their system based on what's out there, and they'll send us a payment based on that, okay?
Okay.
So that's how they will be notified. Anyone out there that's hearing this, don't worry about your mortgage companies, okay? We will take care of them. They will be notified. They will know when to make payment in the same manner that we're saying here today. So they will be notified.
Thank you, I just got relief.
Well, definitely, we're going to
And I'm pretty sure there are many others out there that were probably thinking the same thing I was. You know, how
Right.
does my mortgage company, who's not in this area, is going to know of the changes that are happening here?
Absolutely. I'm glad this is being televised. It will help somewhat in trying to explain what has occurred here. It's an unusual situation. This is not something that is routine. You don't find this kind of thing happening, but when you have new systems being implemented, and this is a tremendous exercise, so there are going to be hiccups. And I am very, very pleased that we have Tyler on board, and they've done an exceptional job in working with the tax assessor's office as well as the tax commissioner's office. And I'm excited when all of this is automated in our office that we can do this, because for the citizens, you will be able to go online for us when it goes live for us at that point in time and actually make your payments online, okay? And we're working now to do that long-awaited step to make things easier for the taxpayers and not having to come in. We hope for 2017, you'll be able to use credit cards, okay?
I have one more question or a suggestion. Could we make those inserts as simple as possible?
Absolutely.
Because I've seen inserts where they're trying to explain to you something, and you have to read all this technology, all this technical stuff way, and then at the end, and with busy lives and kids screaming and the stove cooking, you just say, oh, yeah, whatever, I'll read it later, and you don't. I would like to see it, you know, right in the
Big,
beginning.
bold, and simple.
Here's the new thing, on this day, blank, blank, on this day,
The
blank,
KISS
blank.
principle, right?
Correct. Thank
do
you.
it.
And that's not to offend anybody, it's just that we live such a busy life, and there's so much details going on, we'll just glance at it and throw it to the side and miss the whole point.
Yep. We know our audience, we will do it for you.
Mayor Pro Tem, just a couple of other points I'd like to make. after we had our meeting yesterday at 2:30, I asked the tax assessor's office to contact the superintendent of education because this impacts them as well, the cash flow concern. And wanted them to schedule a meeting with him prior to this council meeting to share what we're dealing with. I know that he attempted, and I think that maybe the superintendent is out of town or that could not be worked out, and so he was going to send an email to the superintendent to share the conversation that was going to be had here at council meeting this morning on this matter. And I wanted them to share with them that we will maybe pull the discussion from this meeting and send him a link that he could then send to school board members in the event they did not watch city council and wanted to benefit from this discussion. And so I believe you've sent the email this morning, and then we'll be available at perhaps the next school board meeting to answer any questions and give them a forum, a session like what you've had here today, because really about 60% of our property tax collections go to the school district. We get roughly about 40%, so they need to have this conversation because if it's a cash flow concern for us, it probably will be for them. And so I wanted you to know that. And then before people, conversations start going around, I want them to understand the structure. The tax assessor reports to a tax assessor board. That tax assessor board does not report to the mayor. A tax assessor board does not report to the city manager. You just need to know the structure. And so they are here today to make a report to council. And they will make a report to the school district, and all taxes will be collected instead of a portion, 40% or so October 1st, and 60% on December 1st. It will all be due December 1st, and if not paid by December 1st, appropriate penalties will be assessed thereafter. But people can pay, as the tax commissioner stated, you can pay 50% in October, or you can pay 100%. You can pay 60% in October, or you can pay 100%. And so those who are accustomed to paying October 1st, you can still do that. And we hope you will. And that way, you don't pay the full load December 1st. So continue business as usual. It's just not mandated, and there is no penalty for October 1st. And so we hope citizens will do business as usual. It's voluntary, but it's not voluntary after December 1st. And so I wanted to make that clear, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I see none.
All right. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, we will bring that millage ordinance back next week for a vote. It will include the due date of December 1 for all property tax payments.